Hi all, welcome to Anime Echoes. So we'll be returning to the previous format where I'll be talking about the novels in parts. Unfortunately, to talk about them like character by character, it takes a lot of organizing and work to get those episodes out. And right now, I just don't have the time to do that. So for Volume 5, I'll just be giving my thoughts, split by parts. So the novel starts off by talking about a guy who wishes happiness for everyone, saying happy ending would be a good nickname, but apparently he's a bad guy. I guess the idea is that not everyone who wants happiness for others is a good guy. I'm pretty sure they're talking about Alma here. Another interesting tidbit in the beginning was learning about the initial intention behind the eating process for immortals. It was never supposed to be used in like a nefarious way like Zillard used it, to eat up everyone's personalities, knowledge, and memories without their consent. It was never meant to act as it was never meant to supposed to be an act done through force. It was supposed to be an act of letting go, of giving up, where an immortal gives up their life to another as a means of preserving the totality of their life within another person. A moment of transcendence. Now let's cut into the story. So we start off with Sylvie. She's scared out of her mind with Zillard approaching her. In fact, Zillard tries to eat her, but he can't. He stands there confused. Turns out, Sylvie never drank the elixir of immortality when everyone else on the Edwina Advis did. Niall, a person on this boat, comes out of nowhere and then severs Zillard's arm. Zillard dashes off. There was a really cool image that popped up as well in this scene. An image of Sylvie looking frightened, and Zillard was about to put his hand on her and kind of eat her. It shows how much of a madman Zillard actually is. It also shows how Sylvie looks like in the past, which is very important for later in the story. After Zillard leaves, Alma pops up. He tells them obnoxiously to smile within this situation. Niall thinks he's being naive. Alma says that he's going to try to convince Zillard to change his mind. Niall says Miser would not be okay with that. Turns out the Miser we know today, who's pretty chill for the most part, is a bit different to the Miser back then. He was enraged and out for blood. Alma says in response to this that he'll go calm Miser down. He also says that if he gets eaten by Zillard in the process of trying to change his mind, then he has absolute faith that the others will take over. You get the impression from Alma that he's quite naive, but it's hinted at that it's not coming from a place of not knowing that he could potentially die, or not understanding the gravity of the situation. Alma is just committed to making sure that all of the positive options that exist within this scenario are at least given their due diligence. He wants to at least try the option that makes everyone smile, the positive outcome he can find. Alma goes to find Zillard and they do meet, but he ends up doing a flip and splashes into the ocean. Turns out Hui and Denkuro drove up Zillard. After this, he finds himself talking to the demon, the same demon that gave everyone the elixir of immortality. Even the demon is like, did you actually think you could change Zillard's mind? You saw the guy, right? See, when Alma heard that Zillard was actually smiling, that gives him the confidence that he can change his mind. It seems that smiles mean a lot to Alma, and that it gives him hope that people can change. Even an evil smirk that revels at the sight of blood is a smile that showcases hope for humanity within a person. Any sort of smile represents a person is still human. He considers it proof of joy within a person. He basically wants Zillard to just apologize and then atone for his sins. The demon queries this. What about all of the victims from Zillard's onslaught? Don't they deserve justice by having him killed? Alma says his attention doesn't go to the dead because the dead don't smile. The dead don't feel joy or anger. When he says such things, we hear the demon say that Alma is somewhat of a villain himself. And this is coming from a demon, mind you. Alma's pretty interesting, and what's really interesting is that in this scene, the demon offers him any power he wants. He gets one wish. Before we can see Alma's answer, we cut away. Alma's choice in that moment is a really good mystery to have hanging for the novel. You're constantly thinking, what did Alma choose? And through that, you get sucked into the story. I thought this introduction for this novel was really awesome. We dive into the past and see how chaotic everything was back then on the ship. And we even get to see that the demon, he was still around. I thought we'd never see the demon again. I thought making the demon be more of a fully fledged character, even if it's for a little bit, was a stroke of genius. So now we move on to the main backdrop of this novel, the village. Alma enters a village and is guided by some little girl. He tells her about like Christmas because she doesn't know what it is. He tells her to smile because that's what everyone should do in his opinion. The girl, who we can tell is kind of subservient in a way, like she calls him like Master Elmer, thinks to herself, if I stay around this person, maybe I'll be able to remember things about my past. Maybe I can recover my memories. She thinks to herself, is this a feeling of like anticipation or hope? So once again, off the bat, we're put into a new scenario that is littered with like a lot of intrigue. We have no idea what's going on at this time, and it's a great way to like once again build up more mysteries for us to solve. Also, her questioning if what she's feeling is anticipation or hope is like key to her emotions and feelings, which also play like a central theme in this novel. After meeting the girl, we do like a hard cut to like 2 days later. Alma is getting like destroyed by the villagers, like beaten and bruised and murdered really. The villagers think he's like conspiring something. We meet Master Des, and he seems like kind of a dick. He actually hits like that girl with the club and she like falls down. The girl is still thinking to herself, man, I just want to be with Elma. It seems in like 2 days she got pretty attached to him. She even thinks to herself that she hasn't like wished for anything in years. So we can see that she doesn't really have much agency in her own life. She then says something really strange. She says that she has herself on her shoulder. At the time, this was like what? Like, doesn't make sense. How can you have yourself, like, on your own shoulder? We'll get to this later, because it's important. Anyhow, Elma's getting destroyed, and all she sees is Elma becoming more painted in red, and her feelings become more and more painful. Feelings that she hasn't felt in a really long time. Once again, a scene that, like, builds a lot of mystery and leaves us, like, really confused. So let's move on to Shez, Misa, Sylvie, and Niall too. Shez is turning 300 soon, which is pretty cool. We find out that they're going to see like an alchemist to inform them that Zilad Quates is dead. When we see Sylvie again, her personality seems very different from the like scared person we saw before. You get the vibe that she can kind of act like seductive almost. They're all like reminiscing about different alchemists, naming Elma and Huey. As they're on this drive, they notice that the trees are growing in places where like sunlight should not reach it, so it's kind of confusing to them. This is another moment of foreshadowing by the author. Sylvie is and after this, Sylvie is like teasing Shez and wrapping her arms around him, and I think one of them talks about like monsters, but Shez tells Sylvie that she's never met a monster, and it's clear that he's talking about Claire Stanfield, the rail tracer, in this moment. His haunting experience with Claire still sends like shivers down like Shez's spine. I like that despite all the years that have passed, Shez remembers that moment. After this, they find a dead end, and Misa tells them that the place is like private property, so the village is private property. Now after this, like Misa's wild side like activates, which is interesting because like up to this point, I don't think we've really seen Misa's like wild side. He like puts his boot on like the pedal and then revs up like on a landslide, and to everyone's shock, they go over it and then fall like spectacularly. Poor Niall, who's also like in the boot, was in for like an extra shock because he can't see the fall coming. It just kind of happened. It's interesting to know that Misa also has like facets of his personality where he does things at his own speed and not at the pace of others. Now Misa and the gang are getting surrounded by the villagers. We get to see the viewpoint from the girl in the village from before. She thinks that the vehicle that they're driving is the same as what their traders use. Now this traders, that like name, that'll become important later. She thinks that they're going to be killed, but she believes that she can only like tell people what she sees, right? Like that's her role now apparently. Like she can just kind of watch on and that's all she does. This girl at the time felt like a prisoner almost, like who never really did anything she wanted, like even after hearing that as well. Like that was my first impression of this girl. Like someone's like taken her and someone needs to like get her out of there. Back to Misa and the gang. They look at the village and they think it looks like a badly made set. Like Misa has seen what a village of this era should look like, all things considered. But that wasn't it. I thought the description of the village like really helped it come alive. Like the idea of it being like a badly made set was like a pretty apt description that helped me feel like immersed in what these characters are like witnessing. Also, we get to see the character personalities play out in this scenario. Like Shez is scared of like the village. Misa just kind of wants to converse with the people. And Sylvie is sad that there won't be any like showers. They all slowly get out of the car and Des the village master, tells them that they should leave. As the villagers see a little boy and like a woman like leave the car, they feel themselves being like less agitated. But once Miser mentions Elmer C. Albatross, the hostility is back in full force, and Des orders the attack. The tension was pretty high in this scene. I love the way the author kind of like builds up to Miser revealing Elmer's name, and the immediate repercussions after that made all the build up worth it. Like you knew Miser was going to mention like Elmer at a certain point, or like you kind of got that vibe. Moving on, Miser does end up getting like shot, and they see his blood come out, and then wriggle back into his body. The villagers look in horror, but it's not because it's something that they hadn't seen before. It was horror from like a place of like familiarity. They've seen immortality before. I thought that this was like a really like nice description as well. Making the contrast between like the two types of horror one can feel was a distinction that I really valued. You can be horrified about something because it's so different and eerie that it like churns your stomach. And you can be horrified in the sense of thinking, no, like not this again. A last tidbit was that the Martillo family boss was one of the only people to like react like abnormally as well. So I'm pretty keen to like meet this guy properly and like delve into his character. During the chaos, Niall appears and he like locks a villager's arm in like the car window. He appears like a banshee with like a face mask on. It's a great image that looks pretty wild. Luckily, Niall does listen to like Miser's leadership and tells him like not to attack. Miser knows that the villagers know something about Elmer. See, Miser and Shez have been like searching for like other immortals for 30 years now, and finding Niall and Sylvie were like hard enough. That's why he had become impatient and like mentioned Elmer earlier. After this, 3 sisters dressed in like red come along and ask that Miser and his gang come with them. They mention Master Elmer as well. The mystery just keeps evolving at this point, and you really get to feel that you're in the unknown in like many ways. They go along with them, but they're still like using their car. Miser finds it strange that the villagers don't know that the property is private property. That they didn't just like tell them to leave because they were trespassing. Like that would have just like solved their issue. But instead, they decided to call them outsiders. Now, in terms of like the girls in red, they spoke in like archaic ways, and Des, the village head, called them like the messengers. I like the way the author uses the fact that it's a private property important like in this story. Like Miser makes his deductions based on like actual information he has, instead of some like crazy intuition that comes out of nowhere. I think just like in Volume 4, we see the author's focus on information permeating throughout this novel as well, especially with there being characters that are information brokers as well. They arrive at a fortress and they see Christmas decorations everywhere. A creepy voice starts laughing maniacally. Miser knows it's Elmer and tells him that he's arrived. Elmer is surprised to see Miser. He's really happy to see everyone. Turns out, Elmer had no idea it was them. He just knew that the villagers like hurt people, so he just wanted to save them. But Miser is thinking like, who the hell told him that? You know, like who the hell told him that like people were being hurt at that moment? Like it's a long way away from the spot like where they were surrounded by villagers. Like they went in a car and they drove pretty far. Once again, a mystery that would be like solved later. So like immediately, like the degree of mystery is really, really thick in this novel. After some banter between the 4, we actually learned something about Sylvie. We learned that she drank the elixir of immortality some years after receiving it. She wanted to drink it at a peak beauty. It's an interesting twist, like to the elixir. Generally, most people would not be able to contain themselves into drinking such a thing. Getting rid of the fear of death is such like an alluring invitation. Despite this, she waited, and we will learn more about that later. Overall, I thought it was a fun way to reveal more like depth about Sylvie's character by using like banter. Now comes one of my favorite moments. With Shez, we always get the feeling that he's like an outsider looking in all the time. And we see that's true. When he starts seeing that no one's changed at all after so many years, he feels sad. He sees that it's just him who's changed. It's a heart-wrenching scene and shows immediately how Shez struggles in not making like things negative. Even something beautiful as a reunion results in a deep insecurity within himself. Poor guy's been through hell and it shows. Right after this, we also get another scene that leaves like a somber feeling. The girl is like looking on, seeing the immortals like goofing off and like smiling. She thinks like she wants to smile as well, but she thinks she can't smile. All she can remember is sadness. So with these two scenes, we're starting to see a lot of like the emotional baggage that some characters are holding, specifically Shez and the girl. After this, Elma asks Misa if the other alchemists are okay. Unfortunately, Misa says that only 9 survived. So just think about that right now. There's Misa, Shez, Niles, Sylvie, Elma, Huey, and 2 guys named Denkuro and Victor that I don't know. Apparently Victor is in the FBI and caught Huey, so that's pretty interesting. So I guess there's like one who's kind of like left in the dark. Elma says he's happy like about the news, that they avoided like the worst case scenario. Like that there would be like no one left basically. But he's called out for this. They say he's just being like optimistic. But Elma assures them that it's not just like a positive outlook. He says he won't forget their deaths. He says that for him, smiling is the only way he knows how to mourn people. He's not particularly good at being sad. We also get some like tidbits about Denkuro. Apparently he was a frozen popsicle for like 250 years at the North Pole. So that's pretty cool. After this reunion, the gang start like asking like pressing questions that we as the reader are like really wanting to know. What the hell's going on with the village? But Alma's not like having any of it. He makes them play a game for the answers. Alma like almost chokes from laughing too hard and then he just like vanishes. Right after that, Shez also asks like one of those girls like who she is and she states she's like a sacrifice. So with this scene, we've already like kind of warmed up to Elma and then we're hesitant about him as well. Also hearing about like the girl being a sacrifice, you can't help but query like what are Elma's intentions right now? We do get to hear more about the village. So overall, the village is isolated and the adults of the village would tell the children lies about the outside world. But to be honest, that was all like they really knew. Some people left the village being like too excited about the real world because of like an outsider showing up. So the villagers like doubled down on protecting the village from outsiders. They basically like doubled down on their ignorance. Outside people are now considered demons and once Elma arrived, things changed and that was like 5 years ago. I like that we got this like info dump about the village. It helps like solidify the village as some kind of like ominous thing and like a cult. It just makes it more tangible than like something like random. We cut to the village people and they are in a panic. They're wondering like what they should do about Misa and the gang. Their ignorance is shown as they don't talk about how like the traders' vehicles like look like the like outsiders' vehicles as well. So they don't like accept that there's some like evidence before them. They're all looking to Des, their leader, but he's not much help. His son chimes in and says that they're relying on you to his father, so to Des. This dynamic of like Des being the leader and his son being like the more competent one will be like important later on. I really love what they do with this. At the time, I thought that Des was like peeved for getting upstaged or something like that. Also, at the time, it was really clear that this was all like a misunderstanding between like the villagers and Alma and Misa and all of that. They're like worried that they have to give like the last village girl as a solution. Obviously, like the thing that like pinged in my mind immediately was one of the girls saying that she was a sacrifice. Using these keywords and slowly showcasing more of the plot made me keep thinking while I was reading. Like, it made me keep thinking like, Alma, like, what are you doing? Like, I know you're a good guy and I know this is a misunderstanding, but why run away? Why not just tell Misa and the gang? Is this just your like personality? Like what's going on? Now, during this like village people get together, the girl is looking on and hears like Des shouting. She ends up getting hurt, but Felt shows like some compassion to her and asks if she's like okay. The girl thinks to herself, well, nothing's different anyways, like nothing will change. Things will continue the same. I feel like this is playing with like the theme of the novel, which is like the willingness to believe that something could be better. We see this with Elmer's personality as well, where he always hopes for something greater. You get the feeling that the decision to actually hope for a better future, especially when the world is telling you otherwise, is not just like positive thinking. Especially when the world tells you otherwise, like it's just not just like positive thinking reframing from Elmer. So you see the girl thinks about how the outsiders have all been like kind to her and that like they don't hit her like the villagers do. Alma talks about like different places and the girl like desperately wants to hold on to like this positive possibility for a better future, but she feels like she shouldn't. That it's better to believe it's like an impossible dream.
She almost gets like mad at Alma for showing a possibility that's greater than the one she finds herself in, a life outside of the village. It's almost like being ignorant would make her feel happier. This internal process that she's kind of going through is also like a microcosm of like what all the villagers kind of have to go through in like a split second as well. Like the second they see like a world that could be better than what they have, they immediately like cut it off. Like, should I dare to ever believe that something could be different and specifically better? I personally thought this was like a great look into like the value of having like a positive outlook. See, sometimes with Alma, you get the feeling that he might be like dismissing like the harsh reality of life or something with his always like positive view, and he is sometimes, but when literally imagining something to be better like actually hurts you on the inside, that's how you know you're in a place that you shouldn't be. The possibility that something could be greater than what it actually is, and like willingness to like actually live in harsh conditions with that possibility in mind is perhaps even harder fight than just staying ignorant. Like, do you dare to hope? Now let's move on to Alma after he like disappeared. He likes to go to like high places, so he's just like chilling somewhere on top. And Shez, being as perceptive as he is, remembers that Alma likes to go to these high places, so he finds him really easily. Shez has some personal questions to ask him. Before that, Alma says, "Quit faking smiles. It doesn't suit you." So now the real Shez appears. So he shows his like true personality after like 300 years instead of like acting like a kid. But Alma didn't expect to see Shez literally become like a different person. He just meant it like literally, like you're faking a smile right now. Though Alma picks up on it quick. He's like, "Oh yeah, you are 300 years old. It's not like you'd still act like a kid." Shez says it's strange that Miser, Sylvie, Niles all don't care that he still kind of acts like a kid around them. Despite Shez kind of like bearing his soul to him a bit, Alma still tells him to act like a kid and smile, right? So he's kind of like cutting through it, or like Shez would obviously feel like he's getting ignored, and he says that like, "Don't ignore like my circumstances." Like, I totally get how like that kind of response from Alma would like get under Shez's skin, but Alma also provides his perspective. When you're grown up, it's embarrassing and tough to smile so much. You don't really get that option when you grow up. But when you're a kid, you can be like beaming as much as you like. You can smile as much as you like. He has those perks, and not only that, he has the choice. So Shez has the choice of when to be mature and when not to be mature. Something adults don't have. It's a choice for him, not an expectation. Because he's a kid. And so, because he'll make everyone feel better, he should smile. So, what Elmer effectively does is showcase to Shez that he isn't like dismissing his 300 years, but in effect, showcasing what he has gained with that immortality. He's not allowing Shez to just essentially wallow in just like the negative space. And the idea of like Shez's smile making like others feel better is probably what he's been doing this entire time, but he just doesn't see it. That's probably why Miser and the gang like being around him anyways. Shez still doesn't see the effect he has on other people. Shez probably thinks he's being fake, but his presence has weight and he's actually helping them. Despite this, Shez does push back on the idea that smiles bring happiness, like it's a strange idea in his opinion. Like ranking emotions as like higher and lower is weird. Shez says it's like illogical that someone who considers them to be like an alchemist would like say something like that. Alma says that people who try to turn like gold out of base metals are also illogical. Shez says that he can't say that because that would deny his own existence because he's immortal. Shez is basically saying it's not illogical because it happened. You're an immortal now because of that alchemy. Overall, I really love this entire discussion. Like, once again, it showcases how Elma can make like a positive case without like diminishing the negative aspects completely. That he can show the sunshine that perhaps Shez cannot see. I also like Shez being like super logical and strict. He really doesn't let Elma get away with much. It's a great interaction and it's pretty interesting. You can see like how their personalities would clash, like given their experiences and just like their base personality as well. This entire like interaction or conversation, it showcases like you might think that, you know, having a positive outlook, because you're so positive you just kind of ignore what's bad, could like diminish, I don't know, someone's existence or something like that. But Elma shows that positivity is like a legitimate outlook on life. After this, they talk about the camps of alchemy that exist. which are like researchers slash scientists and mystics. So pretty like more really interesting stuff. They're considered like the latter, so the mystics, because they did kind of like summon a demon after all. And apparently it was Miser who summoned the demon. So young Miser would be a treat of a character to like visit. Like I really can't wait to see what he's like. Like what drove him to do such a thing? Anyhow, Shez still has more like questions for Alma. Like why did you accept us at face value? He's basically like asking Alma why did he like immediately trust them? Like they could have ate him for all he knew. Shez even put his like right hand on his face and he didn't even move an inch. You know, Shez is like, do you not feel any danger? Like, how can you trust so easily? Alma says very simply, I just forgot. To prove this, he even makes Shez put his right hand on his head in that instance. This horrifies Shez and makes him like stumble. Shez clearly still has like those trust issues and he can't fathom how like all of the other immortals can trust him so easily. Like, how do they do it? Shez knows people change, but he believes that human nature is evil. He knows it. He's seen it before him. He finally tells Alma that he ate Ferment, that he was tortured brutally and had to end up eating his own friend. He talks about how he's plagued with Ferment's thoughts. All of his thoughts are full of like hatred and malice towards him. When Shez sees this like within him, he sees himself as like tainted and bad. So when he sees all these people around him, like Miser and the gang and Alma being so good, it makes him compare himself to them. Shez can't help but think he's like rotten in some way, especially seeing himself through like the eyes of another, that someone else could hold that level of hatred and malice towards him. Ferment's soul was laid bare for Shez to not only see but to also feel, and what he felt was awful. Despite all of this, Alma says he's still jealous of Shez, that despite the 99.9% of people that are awful, he found the 0.01% that were good. That's who Miser and the gang are. They are good people that Shez was like fortunate to meet. Shez doesn't really see it that way and says he's jealous of his like optimism. And interestingly, Alma says he's just stating a fact. I think within this scene we get to see what's really eating away at Shez. Every time he sees Miser and the gang, he can't help but compare himself to the gold standard of people that are before him. How can they all be so good? It's almost like he wants to see like some sort of disgust from them so that like the normal that he knows will like come back. It just doesn't feel right within Shez to see that level of warmth, and because of that, he can't fully be like receptive to it. What Alma shows is once again the value of that positive outlook. While Shez only sees what he lacks, which is a certain pureness within him, what Alma sees is how fortunate Shez is. Shez has blinders on anything good happening to him, so we can't help but question it. Alma breaks through that by explicitly stating to him that his life is really good right now, and that he should value that. Though I think like Alma could be like, I guess, less direct about it, so they could actually get along. Like Shez and Alma tend to like miss each other when it just comes to like the phrasing of words and things like that. But overall, like Alma's perspective is definitely one like that Shez needed to hear, I think, in that moment. To continue this conversation, we see Shez's like self-loathing more like apparently. He thinks that the only one who changed was him, and that he was the only one who got like nastier. Elmer sees through this like pretty easily. He tells Shez that he's concerned about like whether he's good or whether he's not good. Instead of questioning it by putting like your life in like retrospective or something, instead just be good. Focus on the now. People can change, and they're like water. It can freeze, but also melt. So if you want to melt again, if you want to change, you can use like the warmth from Miser and others. That's why smiling suits you better, because it's not just for you. He's basically saying it's not just for you, Shez, you affect others. And your smile, it's for everyone and yourself. When you smile, it makes others warmer, and when they smile back, it'll help like melt basically yourself and change as a person. It helps melt like the ice. Smiling will allow Shez to like change as a person. Essentially, smiling makes you receptive to experiencing goodness in a sense. After this conversation, Shez like jokingly says he'll smile if he jumps down. And that's exactly what Elmer does. He just dives to his death. After this, Shez thinks, I'm sorry, Elmer. I just can't smile at all. So, like, throughout this entire conversation between Shez and Alma, I thought it was, like, fantastic. Like, it really goes into, like, what is holding Shez back, and it actually showcases, like, the value of smiling from, like, Alma's perspective. Smiling allows you to be receptive of goodness. It's a subtle way to be, like, open to the goodness that is in front of you, instead of, like, just cauldroning in your emotions on your own. Despite this, Chez's sentiment that he can't smile at all is pretty real. He's not convinced just yet, but it's definitely a perspective he needs to hear. I don't think Alma is particularly good at going into like bad emotions with Chez, but what he is good at is showcasing when there are good things around you. Like if you're just missing them, they're just gonna fly by. That's where Alma is really keyed into reality. After this, I began to notice how like the headings of the chapters are like changing. Like I think we were in like fun as a theme, and now we just went through like sorrow. I think fun could represent like the feeling that the girl was having, like excitement and fun being around Alma. And then sorrow are like the emotions she felt when the fun went away. The sorrow she feels when she like glimpsed something better but unfortunately could only like taste it. She can't make it like her felt reality going forward. The next emotion seems to be joy. So moving on, the Christmas decorations are up now, and Elmer lies about why he jumped off. So he doesn't tell the others what actually happened. Shez feels kind of uncomfortable about this, almost like he's like covering up for like a crime he committed. Miser seems to be pretty like emotionally intelligent. He says that whatever happened between like Elmer and Shez should just like remain between them. Following this, Elmer says something kind of crazy. It's kind of hard to string his thoughts together, but I'll have a crack at it. He says like smiles rule the world. Guys who smile don't die. Villains who rule the world were smiling. So let's smile before the demons do and send food to aid starving people around the world so that they can smile. I think what he's saying is that those who smile are like at the top, like on the top. But bad guys who stand on the top also smile as well. So let's smile before those bad guys can, so that we can kind of like get ahead of them. And through that, let's send food to aid the starving people, which is in effect going against those evil people. Like once again, Alma doesn't like dismiss the fact that people are starving. Like this isn't an example of like toxic like positivity or something like that. That being said, following his thought process is kind of difficult. Maybe other people know how to explain this moment better than I do because it's kind of hard to grasp. After this, we get to see where all like the girls stay. Apparently, they all live in the same house, and it's situated like outside the village. I remember at the time I thought this was kind of strange. Now we come to find out from Alma that he was consistently like killed by the villagers, but he just kept coming back to the village like over and over again. So they were all like, "Whoa, what the hell?" And so he ended up becoming known as like this monster. He kept coming back because he wanted to clear up the misunderstanding, but then he just like kept dying. Like, I mean, I thought this was pretty funny because like Elmer can also be just a completely like hopeful idiot. Um. Anyway, so then he saw that like one of the girls had gotten like burnt. Um, and so he used like alchemy tricks to like threaten the village a little, and so he became known as like the archfiend or demon. After this scene, we get to get some like interesting commentary from Sylvie, Elmer, and Niall about like human violence. Sylvie mentions just how odd the village people are. They have like this mob mentality, and that in of itself can be terrifying. They mention how it's similar to like the witch hunts that happen and like the Inquisitions, where people were accused of being witches and like killed mercilessly in like a mob-like fashion. The explanation we get is that people will resort to violence if they experience terror. And if like the terror is felt in like a collective way, a group of people will justify that terror they feel and then enact violence and then like feel justified about it. This is basically showcasing like the dangers of having like a mob mentality and how that reactivity of being part of a mob can result in like vicious actions. Now, after this, Elmo vanishes once again. Okay, and then like after this, we learn more about Sylvie. So it's always nice to like learn more about her. So Sylvie has gotten completely used to like the modern day conveniences like TV, shower, etc. She talks to like one of the girls, and she finds out her name is Phil. So now we have a name for one of them in quotation marks. Anyway, like Sylvie infers that Alma is probably thinking of like taking this girl like out of the village, but Sylvie thinks that she should do this like if she wants to, like she should make her own decision. We never really got a hint that Alma could perhaps like force Phil to leave or anything like that. So I think that comment was kind of strange, but true nonetheless. So Sylvie says that she wants to have a chat with her in like the courtyard, and Phil immediately says that she got permission from Master Alma, and this was when it like hit me. So spoilers for the big reveal. Well, it's one of the big reveals. So when I thought of how she could connect with Alma, I thought maybe she's a telepath, but then it hit me. So I remembered her like picking herself up from the floor. So what I thought was like she's not telepathic. She's just communicating with other copies of herself. She's cloning herself. There's copies. So basically that's how she's like talking with Alma. She had a copy of herself with him. That's how Phil like told Alma that there were like villagers like attacking Miser and the gang because she was in two places at once. They all shared the same mind. I was kind of proud that I figured this out before it was like explicitly like revealed, but even if I did, as the novel progresses, there's just more and more reveals that unravel. So just continuous intrigue with this volume. After this scene, Sefalt is going to talk to the people in the castle because no one else will. So the people in the castle are Miser and the gang. We see Des, the leader, he's just like chilling and then leans back smiling. We find out that Des's wife passed away, and ever since then, he's been kind of different. I remember thinking, like, what the hell is Des going to do? Like, what's going on with him? It's kind of strange to see him just smiling a bit. But I never would have guessed the outcome. So once again, we get Phil's perspective. She's putting away the Christmas decorations, and she thinks she wants Miser and the gang to stay. She started to think that maybe they'll stay like forever. This is Phil experiencing joy. I think the difference between joy and fun in this story is that fun was like an experience, like Phil had, but it just kind of went away, and then she felt sorrow for having felt something like fun. But in this case, it's being like being with Alma, like consistently. So joy is more like consistent. She has felt consistently good, and the consistency has like a certain staying power, like it's lasting. That's why she. That's why I think she feels like joy because she's yearning for things to continue to be good. Joy in this context has like a sense of longevity. That being said, her oldest memory does flash, and it's a memory of her being like reborn in a white room. In this memory, someone's like speaking and says that like the forest is her glass bottle, like it's her flask and it represents no hope. At the time, I thought like, who is this person? But I thought it was more like a metaphor. Like, this forest represents just like a glass bottle or a flask within your mind, and but once, you get out the village, you'll be out of that bottle or flask. I think it is still a metaphor, but more about that idea is revealed later as well. We hear more about her inner thoughts after Felt tells her that he won't let her be like sacrificed. She thinks to herself, is it okay for myself to just be swept along? By that she means just swept along by the village and like what they do, to basically go ignorant to the outside world. But we know that the truth is she wants a smile, and I think in this case, it's to actually experience joy. And she knows that if she fake smiles, that Alma would be disappointed. It has to be a real smile. It has to be genuine joy. Moving on to Felt, he gets caught by Sylvie for snooping around. He's now talking with Shares and Sylvie, and he asks like the pressing questions like if they're actually demons. They tell him the truth, the entire tale, that they're immortals. Man, this scene makes me think of like the Felt twist that occurs later. I really love this twist, and it's built up so well. Sylvie does further talk about how she decided she wanted like eternal beauty. She did hear about it from like fairy tales, and generally it was witches who wanted it. She also wanted to do it, and she wanted to bring the man she loved a beautiful person. The man she loved was Miser's younger brother, actually, and he never thought it was necessary, but she wanted to do it anyway. I really enjoy learning like little bits and pieces about Sylvie and her thought process in delaying like drinking the elixir. If anything is going to delay someone from doing it, then I guess it would be love. We learn more about this later, but yeah, the more like we learn about Sylvie, the better in my opinion. Moving on to Niall and Misa, they find themselves in a book room with books all about alchemy. They think about how in this day and age, there would be like photos of like private land, like aerial photos from the sky about this village. So for a place like this to be like hidden was kind of unreal. They find 6 gravestones saying like below sleeps one who could not be human. They laugh it off a bit, but in this scene, it's implied that it's still around and it's close. Once again, this is revealed in the future, but it's built up pretty well. The mystery of the gravestones and the demons, like it helped like pull me in, especially with having guessed what Phil was. I really wanted to see if there was like a lot more like mysteries, and luckily there's still a ton. I just want to quickly talk about like a little bit, like a little tidbit that Miser says. He talks about how he doesn't really like the internet, how people can just like look up stuff that he took like 300 years to explore. I think that's an interesting point. Like the internet really like takes out the feeling of like venturing into the unknown, especially with like aerial photos and things like that. We tend to know everything. That being said, we also do have the choice to venture out and explore. The felt experience of exploring something and having information at your fingertips about everything isn't the same. There's probably ways you can diminish your own experience too much by, like researching too much about something. But ultimately, your experience in like real life, despite what you read, your experiences will still have like a certain aura that could never be captured by the internet. Like those experiences are yours and only yours. Moving back to Phil, she's thinking that despite the existence of Felt, who seems like a good person, she wants to be out of the village. She wants to hope for a better future. It's been a while since she could actually visualize a different one. She thinks about how if the village was linked with the outside, how beautiful that would be. She believes she is still capable of wishing for happiness. After this, we get knowledge about how Phil and her copies work. When one gets weak, they get replaced. The villagers tried to see how they get replaced, but some of those villagers disappeared. So Phil was treated like the outside world. They treated her like crap, basically. Also, Des treats her like shit as well, and he's like the head of the village, so naturally, the rest of the village like follows suit. Phil has existed since like the inception of the village, back when the village itself came to be. Following this, line, Des thinks to himself that it's a good time to say goodbye to this village and smiles. I remember seeing this and I thought, is Dad about to like die? Like, is he going to die in his sleep? Like, what's going on? I was really confused. Why did he sound so like resigned and peaceful? Now back to Felt interacting with Shez and Sylvie. He says he'll tell the villagers about how nice Shez, Sylvie, and the other mortals are. Shez says don't, like they'll probably turn on you and think you're possessed or something. I like that Shez shows his like soft spot for children. He still has it after all these years, but that's not all he has. He also thinks that the village is closed off, like the sealed space the rail tracer like left him in after torturing him. Shez thinks at least the rail tracer isn't here. After this scene, they end up capturing Elmer by teaching Phil to lie, and they all kind of figure out that Phil's a homunculus, that they all share like a hive mind, and that's how they were giving messages to him despite not being near him. Elmer says he'll tell them about everything in like February, because the traders will come then. Misa and Shez weren't surprised with Phil being a homunculus. They knew Ennis after all. I remember this scene being like, Elmer, like, tell me what's going on. Like, why are you withholding things from me? But after a while, just like Misa and like the gang, you kind of resign yourself like to it, like Elmer's antics. It's just Elmer being Elmer. But I also think it's right based on like what happens next. It's just better to show it in person and watch it kind of reveal itself. Elmer has basically been like showing Phil different like festivals and customs, like Christmas for example. The villagers thought that it was like a demonic ritual. Phil is deep down like holding out for February, because then like the last of her will be held up as a sacrifice. And what that means is like, so each time they've been sending like a Phil as a sacrifice, and now all of her can like be together, so there's only one left that needs to be said. And then she's going to smile brightly to Elmer. She wants to make sure her smile is so good, so she's like practicing it. Damn, like when I heard this, I thought like, what a wholesome kid. Watching Phil go from experiencing fun and then feeling sorrow and anger because she glimpsed a better world, and then experiencing fun on a continuous basis, which turned to joy, was really good to see. She's a great character, and this dialogue was personally really touching for me. And now, February is upon us, and the trader finally arrives. She sees the villagers basically bartering for what the trader offers. She's looking on, and she doesn't really mind it. She knows that if she thinks about all the abuse and all the painful memories, then she'll just like sink into sadness. But she wants to hold on to the hope that Miser and the gang and Alma have shown her. She wants to hold on to that shining light. And after this, Alma says that the trader will be taking them to where Phil's was born. So now they're all riding in the back of the truck, and Alma asks Niall a question. Why do you wear a mask? Apparently it's because he doesn't want to accidentally get eaten in sleep by someone thinking, I want to eat this watermelon in their dreams. It's pretty hilarious. I guess Niles is like a pretty, like, anxious dude, all things considered. Though Miser does think it's something like deeper, that Niles has been on the battlefield for like 300 years. He doesn't know what Niles was trying to learn by being in that environment for like such a long time. So we've now created some like intrigue into Niles' character. I'm curious to see where that goes. The Grey Magician from the Railroad arc also kind of comes to mind. He too was on like the battlefield. I do wonder if they're linked in any way. I don't know, not sure to be honest, but keen to see how this all kind of comes together. Another interesting tidbit is that that Alma says that Miser has changed, that he's more cheerful now. This is pretty interesting because I feel like we've only seen the cheerful Miser up to this point. I'm interested to seeing the Miser that's less cheerful, and the Miser that was like out for blood. A different side to his personality and his past as well. So after this, we finally get to see the truck driver. Turns out one of the traders is Bill Quates. When I saw the last name, I couldn't help but think of Zillard. I had the same reaction as Miser. So Bill is a descendant of Zillard. So Bill never got to do what he like wanted to. So he's been like fulfilling the wishes of his parents. He worked as Zillard's assistant, but Zillard didn't like trust anyone about his own immortality. He trusted no one, really. We get some information about the homunculus-like fills. So this type of homunculi cannot go like outside its flask, but fundamentally it should have like perfect knowledge. So the general idea is like constructing a homunculus is to make a human that was perfect in some sense. In trying to do this, they made two of them. One that aged and one that did not age but had a short like lifespan. Phil is of like the latter, the one that does not age but has a short lifespan. So that's why there's like 5 Phils, and why she has to be like reborn again and again. They theorize that Phil was almost like being possessed by some sort of like colony that like regenerated infinitely. They don't know if it's like a multiversal thing. Like Phil was actually like the idea is that like Phil was actually possessed by a multiversal being, but they did know. Well, I guess maybe that like idea came about because there was like a demon involved. So they created like the demon realm theory. The way this theory works is that there is like some place which acts as like a foundation for these 5 bodies, like a foundation for the hive mind. I guess the idea is that the foundation is like the link to the demon realm, or the foundation is from the demon realm itself. It's kind of confusing. What happens to like those like copies, like when they get weak, is that they're like ground and then like recycled. Then there is like a clear liquid that they use to like link the minds. And because of the like environment and the human cells like used, they all end up looking like sisters. So the idea is that the second the empty body like absorbs the water or the liquid, they are possessed from like another realm. So when Phil dies, it's almost like frozen in time, like a save data from a game. And then when the liquid is injected into another body, they just start from that save data. We also learn more about the village itself. Like the village was made by Zillard and Bill's father as a simulation of sorts. They wanted to test the capability of homunculi. Like how much information could these homunculi in effect like take in? They thought that these homunculi within this flask would over time gain like perfect knowledge. But it had to be like done in a secretive way, so they used an entire village as like guinea pigs for the experiment. And that's what that village is, the village we've been, traveling through. It's kind of screwed up if you think about it. Bill wants to like atone for the sins of those two. He wants to try save Phil, It's the least he can do for overlooking the suffering she has been going through. Bill didn't actually know that Phil was being abused. He just kind of ignored her out of guilt, so he actually had no idea. We also finally get the reveal about the trees. Turns out they injected the forest with the immortality serum. So the trees only died from like old age and like nothing else. That's why the trees at the entrance survived, despite not having like any sunlight. They were immortal trees that allowed the place to remain hidden. After all this, Miser says that like he should spread his love not just to Phil, but also the entire village. Like they're all victims too, if you think about it. Like set them free. The reason they brought Miser along was so that his expertise in alchemy could help Phil and maybe like extend her life. Not only is this all like explained, we get to hear about why Elmer like rocked up to the village in the first place. He had heard that Zillard had ties to it. Even back then, Elmer thought he could change Zillard's mind. Turns out, Elmer was the one who leaked the information about the village to like the information broker that Miser was using. So he purposely wanted Miser to come along, but he didn't think anyone else would come too. That's why like Elmer was surprised when he saw them. Elmer was genuinely surprised to see like Sylvie, Shez, and Niall. Elmer's asked if he still like dabbles in alchemy, and he says that he wanted to make money using alchemy. He wanted to give the gold to the poor of the world, but he realized it was a shallow representation of happiness. Gold drops in value in like products after all. He realized that human happiness wasn't so simple. After that, he doesn't feel like particularly attached to alchemy. It no longer helps him with his purpose of making the world like generally like smile. So overall, this has been like quite like a information dump, and there's been like reveals like one after another. Just a lot going on, and I remember my experience reading this portion of the story was one of just genuine like fascination. The story just kept unraveling more and more about like what was actually happening. You can tell the author really thought out all the ins and outs of the story. I was really loving it, and the next reveal made me love it even more. So the gang asked what the other homunculi is up to. They did say they created two, so it's not just Phil. It's revealed that he's in his second body now, that he's kind of just living his life as a villager. They realize who it is in like such a silly and kind of hilarious way. They drop like pencil sharpenings on the photo or like of that character, and because that character has a mustache now, the pencil sharpenings kind of like just fall onto like his face area, and they realize who it is. They're like, "Oh, it's Master Des." I was like, "What? Like, no way." So I thought this was like a really good reveal. Really enjoyed this one. Upon hearing this, like Phil dashes away. She's thinking, no way, like Des, like the guy who's been abusing me, is basically like my homunculus brother. She eventually finds him, and he seems to have been just waiting for her. Des knows that Phil knows, and basically we find out Des's plan. He wants to put the homunculus liquid into the well so that everyone in the village can drink it. Apparently he tested it once. If you put the liquid into a person, it becomes like a battle of the minds. Essentially the battle of the realms. The human realm versus like the demon realm. The mind on Earth and the mind from like another dimension, I guess. That's the general idea. So now we're in the medium of magic. And whoever wins in that fight takes control of all of the other person's knowledge, and that happens through winning. It's very similar to how like immortals can eat each other. Before we thought of it as just an immortal eating like another immortal. But what if it's actually a battle of like the minds going on as well? I'm not really sure how that would work, to be honest, because it's not like the minds are competing per se. You're just getting like consumed if it's like a mortal eating another immortal. Yeah, so I don't think it is similar. I think there are like specific differences that play into this, but I don't know, maybe more is like revealed later. Now we get to hear about like Des's true feelings. He's sick of the wretched little village. And just like Phil, he wouldn't have felt any sorrow if he didn't feel hope. The idea that things could be better. Like Phil says that like she won't let him drop the liquid into the well, and she ends up getting like cut by Des, who's using like a knife. After this, Phil actually ends up like stabbing him and killing him. The villagers like see this and they call her like a murderer and a witch. Phil thinks to herself that she knows like this is true, but she doesn't regret it, right? Like she knows what she did. For her, despite everything, the village is still her world, and she'll kill to make sure that it remains intact. Phil, like Dez's son, comes along and he's mad at Phil, obviously, because, his dad just died. But after what's revealed later, this scene, like recontextualized, feels very different. During all of this, Phil remembers the emotion of anger and fear. It's coming back to her. Her anger allows her to have conviction, and she thinks like, I won't let you break my world. But then she gets hit by a rock and thinks, I knew it. I knew it wasn't okay to dream for something better. I knew I shouldn't have dreamt. I think this idea of how much sorrow a person can feel just thinking positively is really well emphasized here. It's not only Dez's motivation for his actions, but also Phil's. Like, they both know that to dream of something better when your current situation is crappy is a really tall order. When she says, I knew it, I shouldn't have dreamed, my heart kind of broke in two. I thought it was a really good scene. After this, Shez also gets knocked out, alongside another Phil. But as we all know, Phil has multiple bodies, so she's not completely captured or anything. But Shez is. Phil resolves herself, thinking like she can't cry until she has helped Shez. Shez wakes up to villagers around him. He thinks the heart of the plan was to capture him and that it came from Dez. But it turns out it was Fel, the guy we thought we created genuine connection with. The son actually betrayed Miser and the gang. Shez is surprised and thinks to himself that betrayal still stings pretty deeply. He's also thinking back to like Fermit. See, Shez hasn't felt this kind of pain in such a long time that he forgot it hurt so much. He had been hanging out with like Miser and the gang, like people who accept him, so he hadn't actually felt genuine betrayal in a while. He looks at the villagers before him, and he's not frightened at all. They're nothing like the rail tracer, of course. There's no need to be scared. In fact, the villagers are afraid. It's the same as Fermit. He was afraid of Shez, and he enacted violence on him, and now the villagers are trying to do the same. They're just scared of him. Shez starts to laugh because of what Elma said before, about him being really lucky to have found the 0.01% of people who are good was true. See, Shez knew that people could have evil hearts, and that perception had clouded his judgment on Miser and the gang. He just couldn't believe that they could be that good of people, and fundamentally, that he could have met such amazing people, that he could have been so lucky. But when he actually sees people he genuinely doesn't like the villagers before him, when he sees the wickedness that people can have, well then his actual friends genuinely shine. They shine so brightly to him. With this he has resolve. He feels grounded emotionally. He jumps back into the fire to undo his rope. We get an awesome image of like Shez encased in flames. Probably my favorite image of the novel. It's such a good moment, and it just looks badass. He's like engulfed in flames. He's like burnt a bit, but he's like kind of coming out of it like a ghoul. It looks so good. Anyway, he tells all the villagers to move as they look on in shock, and just walks out after throwing his flaming jacket. He's a badass, and it's a really good scene. It's such a great moment of his character, and he develops in that moment too. Like, who knew that Shez could obtain like genuine clarity by experiencing a betrayal? But it makes so much sense. I really love this scene, and so far this is my favorite scene in the novel. 10 out of 10. Shez is a great character. After this, we get a funny scene where like Niall gets like accidentally hit by a truck that Miser's driving. Like Niall was trying to like go save Shez, and then he was gonna like attack the villagers and stuff like that. But then Miser just like hits him because he thought that like Niall would like move out of the way. It was just ridiculous but funny. So after this, the Phil that was like previously angry, her anger has kind of dissipated a bit. She believes that she needs to actually atone for the death she just caused, for killing Dez. Niall gets mad at her and tells her that the villagers are misguided, and that if she ever decides to go back, he would have no problem razing them to the ground. He says to her that she may not be wrathful, but he is. I wonder where Niall's wrath comes from. And could this also be talking about anger in general, or holding on to anger? Phil dissipated her anger, but Niall is basically telling her to hold on to it. Elma butts in, saying that they should care about the villagers in some sense. Elma says that if a person can smile, then they can be redeemed. Niall talks about Zillard and how the idea of redeeming him would leave a bad taste in his mouth. Zillard has killed 27 people after all. He says he has seen people like Alma on the battlefield, and he never works out for them. The positive perspective is just a delusion. Alma rebuts. He says that obviously it wouldn't work on the battlefield. That's a place where people are killing people to protect something. That's why I'm here and not there. Alma says that in order to make a happy ending, he would sell the world to the devil without a second thought. After this, I thought this must be like the more nefarious side of Alma. Nefarious in the sense that it's like exaggerated. Like he will do anything, like absolutely anything, in order for a happy ending to occur. Selling the world to like a demon sounds like a bad ending, so they say it's like a contradiction, but I think that's the point. Alma will always resolve himself for the happy ending, no matter what. After this, Sylvie gets captured and bound by like a shadowy figure. The figure is talking about taking over her body. Sylvie says confidently that she will win the mental battle. I remember at this time I was very confused. I was like, only someone with the liquid could make the mental battle actually occur in the first place. So who is this person? Sylvie tells the shadow that once a witch gains eternal beauty, then they think that now all my wishes have come true. Now it's time to make others' wishes come true as well. So basically, despite the self-centeredness of a witch, you eventually help others out. But the shadow says that he can't do that. He doesn't have that much leeway. Now turns out the shadow is Felt. Now we get to the big reveal. So it turns out, the actual Felt, the real son of Des, died when he was young. See, Des the homunculus had gone to the top of the village, and in effect, the top of his world, right? His world is in effect the village, of course. Like he married the daughter of the head as well. He was like at the top. But his wife was ill, and he didn't want her to know that his son had died. So he played both the part of the son and the father, using the liquid on his own son. After that, she passed away and the dynamic started to form. Des the incompetent father and Felt the competent son. That was their dynamic. So before, when we see all the villagers looking up to Felt and shit-talking Des, well, it turns out that they're just the same person. They share the same hive mind. After hearing about the outside world properly from like Sylvie, Felt/Des decides he wants to go out, and he hated the entire village too, so he wanted to end them all. He has also put the liquid into the like lumps of meat, so actually he can kind of turn into like a meat slime monster, and he starts laughing. But Alma says in a piercing tone to not fake laugh. I really like this scene because Alma can tell when a laugh isn't fully real. He's very in tune with that. So with this line, like we the reader can tell that there's going to be more about like Felt when it comes to like his internal stuff. Like how he feels internally, he's just not being honest right now. So now we get into the fight. Basically, Alma vomits like oil over the meat slime thingo, and Misa ignites it. But the meat fragments end up going into like Alma's mouth, which contains the liquid. The liquid could result in like Felt taking over his mind. But Alma says to Misa like to basically eat him if that occurs. So he takes a bet on himself. And Misa agrees. But it's like more of a ruse actually. See, Misa had slit Alma's belly and gotten the meat fragments out, and Felt could not tell because of the angle that they were both standing. After this, Felt appears to be like dying, and he says like serve you right to Alma and smiles. Alma says, once you're dead, I'll smile. He talks about how dead people don't like bother him, I guess. And then we see Alma's more true nature. Since Felt smiles thinking those words to Alma, like thinking like screw you, in Alma's mind, that's a happy ending for Felt. It was a genuine evil smile, of course. And that's where we get the narration about Alma's character. See, Alma is evil, truly a demon. All he cared about was creating a happy ending, and that's it. A villain who wasn't aware he was one. Alma works at the behest of a happy ending. Everything else be damned. Now back to Phil's. She's mad at Felt for all the like selfish crap that Felt did, all the abuse. But if Felt dies, she has no object to direct her anger towards. Without anyone to direct it to, then what's all this anger and rage for? So she does the unthinkable. She downs the vial of like liquid, and then unfortunately, Felt has taken over her body. She's lost. But before Niall could attack, another Phil slaps the Phil that was just taken over. Phil basically allowed Felt to live. She says to him that he shouldn't think that he can just take the easy way out by dying. Not after all you did. Don't think that dying would make us happy. Don't take us for fools. This is a great scene where Phil is basically giving out all of her pent-up rage and anger and making it tangible with a slap. After this, Alma tells Felt that now he can actually make amends and atone. Felt in Phil's body, I'll just call him Felt, is like, why should I do that? And let's say I did that, like, what's next? Alma says that what's next would be seeing the outside world, and you can show it to the villagers too. This makes Felt think for a bit, and then he asks, do you think I can be happy? As a roundabout way to answer this question, Alma talks about how there exist many people without hope. Terrible things happen every day. Darkness tends to cloud the minds of people. Despite this, denying hope is an insult to one's life. It's not a crime to be unhappy, but it is not to seek happiness. Alma says he doesn't understand what Felt went through, and even if he went through the exact same thing, he would probably experience it differently. Despite all that, Alma says that he's seen the outside world, and don't you want to see it too, Felt? I'll show you happiness, I will. In that moment, Felt doesn't trust Alma. In fact, he never did, but Alma has always represented the outside world to him, the possibility of something different, and finally, he was fully tempted by the demon known as Alma. Felt cries because he's finally begun to actually hope for something better. He has hope now. Now, after this, Alma does something kind of cruel and also kind of crazy as well. Alma pours fills water into the well. So all of the villagers' memories are filled with the memories of Phil. They get to see how pure-hearted she was, and that she actually wanted to protect them despite all of this. They caused her so much pain and suffering, and now they get to see it firsthand. This kind of reminds me of when Shez thinks that he can't eat Isaac because if he did, he would be flooded with the memories of Isaac, and he would be able to see just how much of an amazing person he actually was. To carry that with you for eternity would be torture. Well, Alma does exactly that to all the villagers, basically saying, look at what you did. He does it so that the misunderstanding will go away. One thing that's interesting, just as a fallout of this, now the villagers know that Christmas is just Christmas, not some demon ritual. After this, we hear about two people being married. I think this might be Firo and Ennis. I can't wait to actually see this happen if this is it. We're now in the more epilogue section of the novel, and we check in with Miser. He says he wants to find Denkuro and wants to go back to New York. Shez is yeah, I'll come along too. Miser says he wants to see if the new Super Mario is out. I thought that was pretty funny. I think Shez and Miser are a really good duo, and I'm really keen to see their story play out. I hope they kind of stick together. After some time, it appears that Felt is feeling lost. He wants to atone for what he's done. See, he's also seen through Phil's memories how wretched he actually was, but he feels lost. He's allured by the outside world, but doesn't know what to do. In response to this, Sylvie offers some guidance, and she talks about her past. Turns out, she was absolutely consumed by vengeance. She wouldn't kill Zillard for taking the life of her beloved, Miser's brother. That's why she changed her appearance. It wasn't just to look beautiful. If she looked different, then it would be easier to kill Zillard. He wouldn't recognize her. But once Zillard was dead, she felt empty. It was almost like her goal in life was gone. She didn't know what to do. She was in a terrible, terrible place. She says without Miser and Niall, she might not have made it. Essentially, what she's talking about is how she had the wrong goal, and not only that, had to give it up. Even if she had killed Zillard, what's next? There was nothing. The goal was too finite. But Felt's goal isn't like that. Wanting to see the outside world is amazing and is quite frankly, potentially endless. Even in her 300 years of exploring, she hasn't conquered it. She also tells Felt to pay attention to those around you, because Miser and Niall did help her. I think what she's saying is that when you have a goal, and only that single goal is on your mind, you might miss out on the rest of the world. You might miss the precious things in your life. So she's telling Felt to not be so obsessed with the goal that he forgets to look around at those that are there for him at that moment. It's pretty good advice, I think, from Sylvie. I'm really curious to see Sylvie's past and her being on her vengeance quest. I'm curious to see if we'll get a deep dive into it. This was also a great scene with genuine wisdom, I think. She also tells him to smile. I think this harkens back to what Alma told Shez in a way. A smile is warm and so can melt ice into water. The idea of melting ice into water was the idea that people can change and develop. If Felt smiles, he can change and develop, and not only that, smiling will make him like more receptive to the love of others. I think this entire scene kind of reiterates his point to Shez. I think that's why Sylvie mentions Alma, even though she doesn't actually know about that conversation between Alma and Shez. We check in on Phils and she feels uneasy, like just thinking about the idea of like Bill Quate's like grandfather having such a large hand in her life. But she like chooses to smile more now. That she wants to see the outside world, and perhaps after forgiving Felt, they both can smile to Alma and he can smile back. She has genuine hope for that. And keep in mind, this idea in her head is a real smile, like a genuine one. After this, Alma starts talking like philosophically about how it's possible that everyone is homunculus, that we all have flasks where we can't imagine anything to be better, and that the only way to expand the glass flask is to heat it, and that a smile is warm enough to do just that. We're talking about how a smile can break through like someone's worldview of what is possible. And it's not just breaking it, but it's expanding it. It's almost like the power of having like positive outlook. They start talking about how Elmer is sad and he couldn't like show like Valentine's Day to Phil and make chocolate and like things like that. Sylvie says that chocolate is just for like promoting sales, nothing more than that. Elmer rebuts that they're underplaying it. He says that there are personal touches that are being put in. Elmer says that they should like introduce new customs to the village. Right now, the village was more of like a sealed glass bottle than a flask. A flask will confine you, but a sealed glass bottle is something where anything can be made. Good and bad things are born. The possibilities are endless. Elmer screams, "Welcome to our bottle." I think the general idea is like it's a bottle, so it's something that can be filled. It has a cap you can remove and fill it up with. Now we cut away and we finally get to see what the wish Elmer received from the demon. Basically, he asked the demon to smile. The demon feels very unsettled by this. He says he can't do that. Elmer says, well then, can you look over Miser in human form? Travel around the world with him until Miser is able to give you a good belly laugh. The demon says that he'll do it. This was really interesting, especially the demon's hesitation to not smiling. It really shows how much like conviction it takes to legitimately smile. Like Elmer is wishing for a legitimate smile from the demon, like something genuine that might go against his like very existence. I wonder who the demon is. Is it someone we already know? I want to see Miser laugh. We get to the end and we see Felt now going as Phil Niburi. He's at the restaurant and apparently the demon is there too. And he's also talking to Isaac and Miriam. And that's how it ends. I really love this volume, like so much. Like I think this is easily my favorite volume so far. I love the atmosphere, the twists, the turns, Elmer's character, who I thought I would find obnoxious, but he ended up being like super cool. The Shez moment was great with him burning himself, but really and truly it was the mystery element that I loved, and also the pacing. I just really enjoyed it. My ranking now is in first place this volume, then volume 3, then volume 4, and then I'm undecided whether I like volume 1 or 2 more. Either way, thanks for listening. Now going forward with this podcast, I'll be releasing episodes just based on like what portion I read, and then giving like the like initial impressions of that. So the release schedule might be like kind of random, but it will be more like frequent, so look out for that. Anyhow, thanks for listening and look forward to volume 6.